Hi, I'm Diana Yoakley. I'm a peaceful parenting coach and mom of three, and I'm delighted to give you the latest science backed research on child development, parenting, and to support you in showing up as the parent that you want to be. Welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today on the podcast. I have here with me an amazing therapist, Leah Guzman. Welcome, Leah. So glad to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that we can talk about how to help parents and build their relationship with their kids. I think it's really important work that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And our audience I think is going to be really um delighted to hear our conversation today because it's not necessarily like most of my other podcasts which talk much more about like um what the parent kind of from what's expected of kind of like parents skills and stuff. What we're going to talk today about is how we can introduce the domain of art, which not everybody might be like skilled at or have talents in naturally, right, as a parent. So how can we bring this domain of art and art therapy particularly into parenting and helping parents build this skill.
Yes.
um, it's such a different, it's the arts, it's such a different element, but it's also therapy and skill building and supporting kids. The long-term goal will be for emotional and mental health for their kids, but using this dimension of art I think is really exciting. So would you tell us a little bit about how you came to do this work, and then a little bit about
Yeah.
what is art therapy for anyone that's
Yeah,
not
most
familiar?
definitely. Well, I am a board certified art therapist. I'm an artist all my life, but I've been practicing art therapy for about 21 years. So I've actually worked in the public schools for 20 years. And so I've worked with elementary, middle, high school, and I'm a parent myself. So I definitely have experience working with kids with art. And I've come to this point
Mhm.
where I've really wanted to show parents how to build relationships using the art. And that's why I have my new book, Essential Artist Therapy for Youth, Creative Ways to Express Big Emotions. Because, I feel like art is kind of pushed aside in school. It's not always on the forefront, but
Mhm.
it's such an amazing tool to use because it teaches problem solving. It's a way to connect with emotions. And the only thing is people don't know how to utilize it. And so a lot of times when I go and do professional development, when I present and things like that, they're always asking me, what can I do? How can I engage with kids using the art? And I just wanted to create like a step-by-step tool book so that if like you're a parent, you're a teacher, you're a clinician, that you're like, hey, wait, I have a resource that I can go to. And whether they're dealing with grief or anger or anxiety, there's some tools that I've loved using. And I broke it down, made videos, and just showed you like how you can work with kids, um, to give it a language, sometimes it is hard to put words to feelings. So it's kind of like it's teaching the skills of how to put the words to the feeling, but also to constructively express it versus being
Mhm.
destructive, because if you hold it in, it just gets bigger, right?
Yeah.
So different ways to
Mhm.
talk about feelings and go and make art about it too.
I love this. I love this conversation because I'm constantly talking on the podcast with other experts about how feelings need to be, uh, they need to flow, almost like
Mhm.
a river. Like the
Right.
river flows, feelings need to flow. And if we try to box them in, like you said, like the container element doesn't work so well with feelings. They'll get stuck in our bodies, right? So we want to let them flow. And I think art is such an amazing, as well as like music and dance and these other kind of creative outlets. They're designed for flow, right?
Right. Yeah, definitely. And even the kids that I work with, they're scared to talk about their feelings.
Hmm.
They're afraid to talk to their parents about their feelings because they feel like they might disappoint them, or there's some shame involved. It's like, hey, I'm feeling sad that this thing's going on in my life. Like maybe their parents are getting divorced, or they did bad on a grade and a
Hmm.
test at school or something like that. And they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to disappoint their parents. And I think the more that we can just be open and non-judgmental, I think that's the big part, because
Yeah.
I think that's what stops most people from being creative, is that they think
Hmm.
that it has to be good or bad. It has to look a
Yeah.
certain way. And it doesn't. It's really, I mean, I talk about this in the videos, but I'm like, it's okay to have stick figures, it's okay to have scribbles, but
Yeah.
it's more about that expression and identifying what that feeling is, so that it can flow, right? We definitely want to let it flow so that it doesn't get stuck within us.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that you have a book that makes it very tangible. And it sounds like it's almost like a workbook in a way as well, because it's very action, like activity, right? Like there's action steps that parents can take. And often parents probably read like books about the theory or the framework, but then it's like, but what do I do and what do I say?
Yes.
So,
Yeah, so in the
yeah.
book, it has, the way I set it up, there's 88 exercises. And so each chapter, so you'll have at least 10 exercises within in the chapter. So like the first
Mhm.
part is building confidence, right? Because that's so important with our kids. And the next is mastering emotions, like different ways to identify those feelings and create like self-care kits and
Mhm.
um, fun things like that. And then anger, and then another 10 exercises with worry and stress and holding sadness and grief, and then decision making. And then the last chapter is about building relationships. So all of this is, yeah, it's all through activities so that you have an
Mhm.
exercise to learn the concept and skill. And I made little videos because I feel like it's like 10-minute
Yeah.
videos so that you don't have to
Mhm.
spend an hour. If you want to spend an hour, you can, but like a 10 minutes, let's talk about it, let's create, and yeah, just start the conversation, right? Start
Mhm.
the movement so that it can just build. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like the idea of incorporating, probably even on a daily basis, pockets in our day that are dedicated to this. I mean, kids are intuitively artists, right? Like we're
Mhm.
all born as an artist, right? And then it kind of depends on our upbringing and the environment, how much time and structure there is for creating art. But kids are naturally drawn to doing artistic things, whether it's actual like drawing or other types of creative outlets. And so, can you talk a little bit about how parents can like maximize on this? Do you know what I mean? Like it's kind of a natural thing for kids, right? And we want to
Mhm.
almost channel it. It's not like we're going to come in with this art workbook and say like, okay, now we're going to like, this is therapy at home, right? Like it's more about probably about channeling the kids' natural tendencies to be artistic and to authentically kind of express themselves in a way that's appropriate for that child.
Yeah. Well, definitely encouraging it, right? Encouraging that it's
Yeah.
important, that
Hmm.
taking that time for yourself to check in with your feelings. And on as parents, I mean, there's been periods in my life where I wasn't doing it and I wasn't
Right.
practicing my own self-care, and that led to my own burnout. And I was like, hey, wait, like everything had to stop and say, let me go into like my own self-care practice and learn the skills that I can keep this on a daily, because if I don't do it for
Hmm.
myself, how am I going to teach my kids? So this is why I wanted, like, so I say it's like relationship building. It's like you can be that model too. Like you could do it with them. Like you can learn these techniques. Because if you're not doing it for yourself, you're modeling for your kids are gonna like pick up on that. And that's when, the big emotions, they get even bigger. And
Right.
and it can go into like this negative patterns and behavior. So yeah, I mean, I love daily check-ins. That's what I call them. I do. That's actually what this behind me. It says Thrive, but I make these like little mini drawings. And it's like, hey, how am I feeling today? It's like one of the most important questions you could ask yourself. You're like, you know what? I'm
Right.
feeling a little funky. And being honest with it. All right, what's coming up for me? And being able to process it myself. But how do I want to feel? And have that power. I mean, to regulate your emotions it's a really powerful tool. I mean, teaching emotional intelligence is something that, wow, they don't teach you that in school.
Right.
So it's like we have to do it for ourselves, and we want to have thriving kids. Like we want to see them grow up and be successful, and we got to do it for ourselves too. Take that time, and it's
Hmm.
just like carving out, saying, making this a priority. Say this is important. Let me do this, and scheduling it in your day. I do it in the morning personally. I wake
Hmm.
up before my kids so that I could say, hey, let me
Yeah.
just check in with myself so I can not be like all over the place when they like
Yeah.
helping them get ready and things like that. But yeah, just making that a priority when you're going to do it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Do you
Do
do
you
it for
find that
yourself
there's like,
too?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that, I wanted to kind of comment on a personal note. When I get
yeah,
into activities that are kind of like artsy like this with my kids, I often find myself really drawn to it just as an individual. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
I like doing this too. And I'm wondering if there's like kind of categories of parents that you kind of see. Maybe the artist ones generally tend to do artsy things anyway. And then when they do it with their kid, it's a little bit more natural, maybe. And I don't know, I'm just kind of assuming, versus other ones that are like, well, arts, like, I don't have time for that right now. Or like, I'm not an artist. I'm not very good at that. I'm more of like a math or organization structure person, right? So are there, I don't know if you could kind of define different categories of parents, if there are such things, and how they would
Oh,
kind of opt
that'd be
into
good to do
this.
some research on. I'm not quite sure of like, I mean, who might be more leaning into it. I think the book is definitely for like teachers, clinicians,
Uh-huh.
parents probably who are open to the creativity.
Okay.
And I think that would be it is definitely who would be like utilizing because they're asking for it. I mean, every time I do like a
Yeah.
workshop, they're like, "Do you have like something like tangible that I can use?" And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
"Let me put this together." People have been asking me this for years.
Uh-huh.
So, but the thing is, I mean, I do these workshops, and the sad part is that people get cut off very early. You know, it's
Right.
either like middle school and high school. They might have an art teacher that might have said, hey, this isn't correct. They didn't get a good grade on something, they didn't follow the steps or something. And then they felt like for themselves that they didn't do well. So they don't even try again. And they
Mm-hmm.
cut themselves off through years and the years and how painful that is for them. And then they bring it back up later on in life and say, oh my gosh, I so miss this. I so miss being creative. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, it's for those people too to say, hey, let me get
Yeah.
back into this because there's a lot of people. I hear a lot of stories. It breaks my heart, and I know it's happened to me too. It's like your ego gets
Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah.
but it's yeah, it's kind of stepping of like you do it more for your own mental well-being. You're doing it for your to feel good, and it's not making that pretty picture. It's not to sell it. And most of all the exercises are in a journal. I have a little
Uh-huh.
kit that I'm putting together. We're going to be launching it soon, where it's like
Uh-huh.
all the exercises are basically in a journal so that you can put it away
Oh,
and then bring it back out when you're
awesome.
ready. Keeps it
Mm-hmm.
in like a safe container and you can take it with you. You can
Yeah.
add on to it and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah, I love that. That there's room for everyone, right? Like some people might just be naturally, like you said, they're asking for it because they maybe already do it for themselves and they want to find ways to include it with involve their kids and teach them some of the talents. But then others might have self-rejected, like you said, earlier on in life and feel like they aren't so creative. But finding this outlet, we always talk about in my audience, resilient parent, resilient child. So
Mm.
if we want to support a kid with building their arts skills, we have to first start with ourselves, right? We
Yes.
have to first find the artist in ourselves because it's really hard to push down like art therapy on a kid when you're like, well, I don't need this or this doesn't help me, but we need to work on this for you, right? I just don't think it'll happen. It's not going to be sustainable even if a parent tries that, right? So I think it's more of like a embodying it ourselves first and then we pass it on much more authentically and naturally and invite it into our routine.
Yeah, and even doing it with your kid. I mean, that's what I
Yeah.
think that's what the
Yeah.
intention of
Right.
the book is like just setting a time that you do it together and just like, okay, well,
Right.
and I break it down super simple. It's just like, okay, here's a list of emotions. So let's pick three. Let's pick a color. Okay, let's see how these play together, right? And we're playing with
Mm-hmm.
those three colors. Okay, and what were those three feelings? How does that relate to my day? When did this come up? And then you're modeling that, and then the kid
Mm-hmm.
has the opportunity to say, hey, yeah, this is what my feelings are. So yeah, it's just
Mm-hmm.
opening that door to conversation for
Yeah.
both people.
Yeah. And it's almost like there's an element of flexibility, like everything, like you said, it's like just open the conversation, open the door. There's no perfection here. There isn't like a grade, right? And the pressure is kind of off, right? That's the whole point, right? Because if there is this pressure, it's not going to be actually as helpful.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Pressure kills it.
yeah, exactly right. And some of my audience may be a little bit more of a perfectionist, maybe a little bit more like anxiety driven as a parent,
Mhm.
and feel that, if they're going to do this, that they have to do it, kind of in a rigid way. But if they start to feel rigid about it, I guess that's one of the clues that maybe they should ease into it a little bit more for the benefit of it, right, to work.
Right. No, exactly. And it's a huge issue. Anxiety is like one of the biggest, issues that we have, especially in America. So it's, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely saying, hey, wait, how can I go about this a little bit differently? How can I be more
yeah,
playful? How can I let go of judgment? And just kind of reminding of, yeah, that's not the purpose is to look at that anxiety. What does it look like? Right? It could be
yeah,
messy, it could be overwhelming, uh,
yeah.
and big, and that's okay. And
Hmm.
but it's just learning those tools to have that conversation with it and make more art about it. So it's
Hmm.
putting it somewhere else versus holding it. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 and letting it flow. As we're talking, I'm thinking about how there has been such an increased like a popularity in the stores for kids' toys. Like, there's been a lot more like fidget toys for anxiety, right? Like,
Mhm.
kind of the mental health stuff is really driving what they're selling in the stores too, to some degree, right? Because it's appealing to people. So I'm thinking of like fidget toys and kind of other things like kinetic sand, but from more of like direct art expression, I see a lot of I see like mommy and me journals,
Mhm.
and and um, kind of, if you think about like the art section, how does art therapy differ from the stuff that parents can get in the store for kids? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah, I'll
what
show
is the
you.
kind of distinction? Hmm.
I have my little bag here. Part of the little kit that I do, it's kind of is you get like a little self-care kit, like the things that you'd like to put in it. We have watercolors and there's a whole bunch
Uh-huh.
of felt. So versus going out and buying your own doll that could represent anxiety or sadness, anger, part of the process is that we create feeling felties. So it's a
Ooh,
step-by-step
that's cute.
process. So this is self-compassion. So learning like what
Hmm.
is self-compassion? Like, we mess up on something. How can we give ourselves a hug and say, it's okay. So teaching self-compassion, right? So
Hmm.
we have different ones like for anger, this one's anxiety. So it's
Hmm.
it's creating your own, this one's sadness of like what colors represent that for you. And
Hmm.
then what would what's coming up for you? What experiences have you had? And so this is, I call it a feeling felty, and it's something you can put in your pocket. You could take it with
Uh-huh.
you. You could either put it in your self-care kit. Maybe you need to hold it when those feelings get really big. But it's more personalized. So you're designing it yourself. You're using the colors that,
Hmm.
um, you know, resonate with you, and putting your own little details, little button for eyes, or you could cut out different shapes. So yeah, I think it's more personal versus just going out and buying
Hmm.
the toy. You're
Yeah.
you're making your own, yeah, your own version. And so there's like a drawing part to it, and then there's the the cutting out, and
Hmm.
giving it that meaning. And you could put messages in it. Oh, they want one flying. But yeah, you could like keep adding to it so it's more personal that you can.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love that. It's very hands-on, and kids get it's almost like an immersion into like the emotional experience, because as you're building it, you're focused on like what are we labeling this emotion? What are the colors? Just spending that time. It almost makes me think of like how adults journal. Probably most little kids don't journal, but
Mhm.
adults like journaling. Some adults like journaling for a
Oh,
therapeutic
I do.
effect, right? And for kids, it's probably going to be more hands-on. Um, like something like building like one of these felt stuffies, or creating something artistic that doesn't necessarily seem so like prefrontal cortex oriented, right? Like a journaling exercise, but it has a similar effect, right?
Oh, it's super calming. I used to make these with a hot glue gun.
Uh-huh.
Because just 'cause I wanted it done in 5 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's totally different when you actually get out a needle and the thread. And I have my kids that have ADHD, like cannot focus. They are able to sit down, and it's so therapeutic to like for 45 minutes. Like I'm saying, like we can work on something for a long term, or several sessions, but just to sit down and just just do the stitching, and it just calms them,
Mhm.
and it
Mhm.
feels good. And that satisfaction that you completed it yourself. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
dopamine. So
Yeah.
it's just it's all these feel good hormones happening. You're like, that's the
Mhm.
direction I want to go. Like this is, you want
Mhm.
to feel good, you want to feel calm. It's going to release that stress. So there's a lot of, yeah, definitely a lot of positives that go with it.
Yeah. It sounds like it's really it's a mindfulness exercise.
Hmm.
Right? Because when you're, and that's what allows you to get into that state of flow and allows your child to get into that state of flow, because when they're fully in the present moment, they're not swept up in anxiety. They're not swept up in a depression, because when you're mindful in the present moment, this is all there is, right? So something like an art activity
Yeah.
allows you to, it gives you permission almost to just, it requires you to be in the present moment, right? Which is actually mindfulness.
Oh, I love that. And like teaching your kid that flow state, that's really powerful.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Now there's research, there's research now that shows that the healing for developmental trauma is it's basically like a stunted growth to some parts of the brain, but the long-term healing for developmental trauma is mindfulness-based exercises,
Yeah.
mindfulness-based activities, mindfulness-based exercises, because when we are in that present moment, our brain doesn't have to expend energy, in the amygdala or um, like, in past memories. When you're in the
Right.
mindfulness of the present moment, it's almost like it gives a chance for the brain to catch up and grow those areas that were delayed in growing, which I know sometimes that's an element with ADHD as well, preoccupied um, with other things, and the prefrontal cortex kind of slows down, which
Yeah.
eventually catches up in many cases. But anything with mindfulness based activities for kids, I think, is very, very great for them. But of course, it's great for us too. And that's why, like you keep saying, do it side by side, because
Yeah.
you're not just doing it for your child, you're doing it for yourself as well.
Yeah, that's what I love about it. I think in
Yeah.
the relationship building is what we need it, and just carving out the time. I mean, that's the one thing that we tell ourselves is like, oh, I don't have time. But it's like
Right.
if you feel like it's important, if you value your relationship with your kids, because they grow up so fast. I can't believe I even have an 18-year-old. It's just like we have to take that
Yeah.
time. It's essential, right? And it's essential to do
Hmm.
it. And do it now.
Yeah. 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 And I think until parents are really courageous enough to give it a try, I think it requires an element of risk taking and courage to try something
Yeah.
that's out of your regular schedule, maybe some community as well to support you in like trying out something creative like this. Um, until you get the benefit of that dopamine hit that you talked about, right?
Yeah.
Um, you'll start to crave more of it. Just kind of like how meditation works and exercise. If you don't do
Yes.
it, you don't miss it. Once you start doing it, it's like a system of a reward system, right? And then
Yes.
it becomes a habit after a while. But initially, you rely on that dopamine hit to keep you coming back for more.
Oh, yeah, yeah, definitely. We do have a community around it. I have it's called the Creative Soul Society. It's for
Uh-huh.
adults, but
Uh-huh.
it is both for art and well-being. And I did like I may have some videos that are kind of
Hmm.
promoting the book, and I do talk about it. It's like, if you want that support to get your own creative practice going, you can do that. And then I have a whole Facebook group of, you could post your art there. But yeah, I think it is important to get a little support, like see what are other people doing, because everybody interprets it differently. And I think that's what's the
Yeah.
beautiful part too, that the creative expression, you give a direction and it's pretty open, of what's going to come out from it, because your anger might look different than my anger, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
You might
Yeah.
be the volcano that holds all the lava in, and then another person's might be the volcano that it's
Yeah.
exploding out. So we're all really different the way we process our emotions. So yeah, definitely in community, like seeing how others work through the art. I think that's important too, most definitely.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I love that. Um, Yeah, our family's going this coming up weekend. We're going to Painting with a Twist, and it
Oh,
just
fun.
makes me think of how it's like kind of the opposite of what we're describing here. It's very step by step. It is a community, but everybody looks this very similar, right? Even though
Mhm.
yes, you can still see the distinction in each painting, but the idea is to create to make you feel good about your art because they're giving it such a prescribed way, and maybe there's a place for that, right?
Yeah.
But then there is a place also for that personalization, individualization, and
Right.
especially with emotions, right? Because everyone has a different emotional experience, and we want to validate that instead of saying it has to look like this, painting with a twist, step by step instructional exercise.
Right, right. And there definitely is a place for it where you just like you want to just learn the skills. Maybe you just want to learn
Yeah.
how to mix the colors and it turns out a certain way. And there is a safety zone too of like, I know it's going to end up like this. Right.
Uh-huh.
So like
Yeah.
you were mentioned before, you have to be a little brave to say, hey, we don't know how exactly what my emotion looks like. Is it big? Is it little?
Mm-hmm.
And being okay with that and saying I'm willing to explore. So it's definitely a level of like self-discovery of,
Yeah.
yeah, what does that look like for me? And then adding the emotional element to it, being able to say, well, this is because we do emotional landscapes a lot. That's actually one of those in here as well. It's like, well, if
Mm-hmm.
your feelings were a landscape, is it a rainy day? Is it a sunny day? Is it outside? Is it inside? What would it look like? Um, and being
Mm-hmm.
able to describe that. Like an
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So kind of just to clarify, a parent, in order to introduce some of these art therapy techniques into their home, they don't have to be an art therapist. They don't have to be an artist even. Um, what would you say is like the kind of the first place to start? Or I mean, we talked about some of it, but just
Mhm.
kind of like, okay, if a parent was like, okay, well, let me give it a try. Like, what would you say are some of the, kind of first tips to get started? And
Yeah, most definitely. So the exercises in the book, the way that I've set them up is that we start with the strengths. So, for
Mm.
example, one of the first ones is the strength shield. I have my own little sketches in the book, so you can kind of see.
Uh-huh.
So it's just like saying, "Hey, what are my strengths? What's four things that I feel like I'm good at? Like whether it's art making or journaling or maybe they're into sports or they're really simple exercises of to say, hey, what am I good at? um the magical treehouse is the next one, like, and so it's just using your imagination and visualization. Hey, if I had a magical treehouse, what would it look like? What kind of snacks would I bring? Who would I want to visit? What kind of books would I want to read? So it's just kind of engaging that the playfulness of like,
Mm-hmm.
who am I? That self-discovery. So the
Mm-hmm.
way I've set up the book, it's like building on those strengths first, because I
Mm-hmm.
think that's really,
Mm-hmm.
really important. And then as
Yeah,
you're
because
doing,
I could see some kids that may be a little bit more anxious and perfectionistic
mhm,
coming up with like resistance. I'm no
mhm,
good. I don't have anything for this. I don't know. What do you think I should put? Kind of
mhm.
like, and I wonder how parents can start to overcome that. And I love that you start with strengths because I think that's exactly the reason why, right? Because if you started with something a little bit more challenging, they wouldn't come back to it.
Right, right, right. Yeah, most definitely. And that's where we always have to have that openness of saying, this is just about, there's not about good or bad. This is about being
Hmm.
playful and seeing what comes up.
Hmm.
So that they can, because you don't want to lose that creativity. Like we said, we're born that way, right? And then there comes a time where that judgment starts to take over, and it's like, hey, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to. And I think one of our jobs, I mean, especially as an adult, of like honoring that creative practice and knowing how beneficial it is to my well-being, because I wouldn't have been able to write 5 books if I didn't. Like
Yeah.
it's so important for me to express myself, because I've been to the place where I wasn't expressing myself, and that was not fun. I had anxiety, I had depression, and I was like, wait, let me come back.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Hmm.
so definitely starting with strengths, and there could come resistance, and that's okay. And that's why I created the videos too, because I also
Yeah.
feel that sometimes you got to watch somebody and see how they're doing it and and being playful with it. So it's like, hey, wait, let me try that. So I thought that would be helpful. So I did like a little QR code
Yeah.
that people can watch the videos and then like see the end result. My book is in black and white, but like all the art that's created in the videos is with color too. So that makes it
Uh-huh.
makes it
Mhm.
more colorful and
And
playful.
I think the videos are really helpful because kids love screens, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, even my own kids, they like to go, they're not really allowed to go on YouTube, just surfing YouTube, but I do
Mhm.
let them go on YouTube and watch videos of art. So they like trace, like,
Yes.
you know, the person draws and then they draw and they've kind of gone nuts with it. Like they've drawn like all kinds of things just watching different artists draw. And so they love the videos, and I think it's great like demonstration when somebody shows you the step by step, then you can actually more competently feel
Yeah.
like you know what you're doing. If you're learning something, you're not expected to know it, but you can then after you're done, you're like, wow, I did this, even though I was watching somebody else do it first.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's why I
everybody
created the
starts out
videos.
learning.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just felt like that would it was a good,
Hmm.
bridging it together so that
Yes.
we can have that connection of,
Hmm.
"Hey, I can do this. I can put it on
Yeah.
pause, do my own, start again."
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. I'm definitely excited to try it with my own kids. And different age kids have different skills. Any tips for overcoming when the kids start comparing each other's artwork and when they compare their own artwork with the parents? Oh, yours is better than mine. Mine's not as good. I think that's a common thing, especially if the parent is kind of enjoying it themselves and they
Mhm.
kind of do the best that they can, but that it looks significantly better than the kids, maybe like, like a 6-year-old. What can you say, or how do you kind of overcome that without, help, without negating their experience?
Yeah, I just the repetition of like that's one of my rules, and I do these online healing retreats, and it's like one of my rules that I say at the beginning each time. It's
Uh-huh.
like we're stepping into this. There is no judgment, so please, there is no good or bad. Yours is better than mine. That's not the purpose of this. We're here to have fun, and whatever comes out, and that's awesome. I mean, if you end up loving it, that's great. You can hang it on the wall, but
Yeah.
we're just here to have fun. So I just kind of nip it in the bud at the beginning of just letting them know that it's not a place for that of judgment.
Yeah.
This is good or bad. So if you address it at the beginning, it's really helpful. So it just kind of lets go of that anxiety,
Hmm.
and it lets go of
Hmm.
that it's supposed to look a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I love that, like starting off before you even start drawing, because they might not know that that's going to come up. And then it might feel
Mhm.
like, oh, look, I don't think I'm very good at art because mom's is better than mine, you know?
Well,
Um,
even drawing the figure, even adults don't know how to draw the figure, and I will
that would
start
be
off.
me. I'm not very, very, my sister's an
I
artist
have it
and
in
she's
the
an
book of
amazing
how to
artist,
draw
but
the
I'm
figure,
not.
and I do like step by step. But yeah, so it's just like putting shapes together. And then
Yeah,
I show
yeah.
you like how to put the shapes together and then how you personalize those shapes so that it looks like
Uh-huh.
you could put clothes on or put a face on or put hair
Uh-huh.
and make it unique for you. But it's just the skills that you don't realize that you might not have. So it's kind of building up those skills.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Oh, I love it. So exciting. So amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us. And I really hope we have some courageous parents out there that if they're not doing something like this on a more routine basis with their kid, that they can get a copy of your book and use it to scaffold themselves, because, we all need um, some support when we're trying to do something new. Might
Mhm.
not come out perfectly when we first try it, but be brave, be courageous, and maybe
Yay.
you'll find your own inner artist. And that's something
Oh,
that would be a
that would
great
make me
role
happy.
model. Yeah,
Like to
yeah,
hear feedback, like, "Oh, I tapped back into my inner artist," and be like, "Ooh."
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think we're such complex beings, we're so multi-dimensional in many ways, but also with our skills,
Yeah,
we all have some capacity for everything, but it's a spectrum. So,
yeah.
push your own boundaries a little bit with a gentle push and see what you come up with. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing about your
Well,
work
thank
here
you for giving me
today.
this
And
space to share my new book. I'm really, really grateful.
yeah, I'm excited. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.